Hello, 22. I am super excited and actually didn't even think I'm going to be here so soon with my lovely friends. And yes, it is a very, very lovely thing to be here with all of you because not only do you speak the same language, you're also very dear to me. And I'm just looking at the colors that my friends are wearing today, and they cannot represent me even better because this is beautiful. So this is Sharing with Heart by Mindful Being, and I'm super excited to have Swati Rahatki, Diana Evensky-Delanborg here with me today, and we're going to have Eva Espinosa joining us shortly. She actually will bring in this theme of fear with us immediately as soon as she arrives, because we got a little bit of insight here on why and how and so on and so forth. So my name is Raditya Lazary. For this year, I am going to introduce myself right away at the beginning. This is one of the resolutions I'm taking with me as a thing. And all these conversations we're holding here are very connected to our hearts. They are coming from our hearts. They are not prepared in any sense because it's all about what's coming and arising for us right here in this moment. We want to make sure that we staying true to ourselves, to our hearts. And this is where sharing with heart means, where it comes from. And we as a community, as a group, want to really encourage you to look within, to really touch that special place in your heart and see what is really true for you. Because there's a lot of stuff going on in the world that we're living in the lives that you're living, everywhere that we're going. And we gotta always remember to find stillness, to always find a place where we can just really be honest and truthful to our inner lives. Because the world that we're living in is not here to do that for us. We need to find people that want us to do that. And so here we are with our first session of the year, talking about a very significant topic, fear. And it was also, Swati was just mentioning before we started, that this is a huge topic, that it can go many different ways. And it is so true because we all have a different relationship to how fear shows up. Some go a total different direction and don't want to know anything about fear, and they are fearless and just heading for that route. Some people are really taking fear to their meaningful life. They want to follow that truth that we need to be cautious. We need to be careful. We need to be, careful about where we're going and where we're heading. And in the end, what I've learned just in the past few days about reading about fear, the ultimate fear that we carry with us is the impermanence of life. That we won't be here forever. We don't know how long this will be. It could be today, tomorrow, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. We don't know this. We don't have the answers to this. And how do we move through this in our lives? So we just want to take a moment and ask ourselves, what is my fear in this particular moment? Can return back. And is it a fear of failure? Is it a fear of success? Is it a fear of non-belonging? Is it a fear of not knowing? And whatever your fear is, it's okay. You have the right to have that fear. And we are going to discuss our own fears today. We're going to discuss how we deal with our fear today and how it is as our life impermanent. So here I am opening it up to our lovely guests, Swati and Diana. Welcome, and please take it on and let me know about your fear, how you're dealing with it, and how you move through life.
Hello, good morning. So what what's arising for me right now is I booked tickets to India for April. I've not seen my family in 2.5 years. And again, this unpredictability of the virus surging and, the wave that's come. I think I'm finally sitting on this fear, like, when do I get to see them? And can I make this trip? Or if I don't, then will they come? So now there's a lot of questioning going on, a lot of analysis. My analytical brain is in full effect. And it's interesting how when I flip the scenario, there's still fear. Say I get to go, and there are these little fears, like, the culture I come from, there's a lot of judgment there. So then there's this fear, like, okay, I've gained this weight, so what am I going to hear? What are people going to say? Maybe I have to answer about how my career is going. What is my financial situation like to my parents? So in both this, it's so interesting how the mind always rides a little on fear, because whether I go or not go, there's still some fear. So I was just, this is kind of what I was analyzing right now, that there's always some little fear, or a bigger fear leads to a little fear, or a little fear leads to a bigger fear.
Hello, thank you, Swati. Thank you, Raditya. Well, as you know me, I have lots of ideas and stories, as always. For me, what came up just now, because I was thinking about talking about something else, was actually the fear of not being needed, actually. Because my kids are growing now, and they are getting more, they're getting more independent, which is good. This is part of and now it's like, for me, choosing the career path, and I'm thinking if I will do my own business still, or I will do other stuff, and I'm just contacting people, or either they don't answer, or they say that's not interesting for a moment, and I kind of feel this rejection. But I know I just have to work with myself. It's not the rejection against me. I know that now. Before that, I would take it very personally before my journey. So it's okay. But I just could sense that fear, of, like Raditya was talking about, failure or success. Actually, I fear both because of my journey. Because if I get successful and very successful, it might need so much time from me that I might not be able to be that mother that I want to be for my kids. And maybe I'll go back to my old ways and say, have hard time saying no, and will burn out again. So there is also the fear of getting sick again. Mm-hmm. Even though I know I've learned a lot and I've grown a lot. So there is this still little fear. And of course, the fear of failure, I've always had it. I was always, before my illness, that was my driving, the fear of failure and the fear of death, wanting to do all the things as soon as possible because you don't know how long you will live, but also a fear of failure because I wanted to be the best in everything, and I don't want to, I wanted to succeed. So there are some old fears and new fears coming together in my life for a moment. Yeah.
That is great, and actually perfect timing, because we are just entering Eva into our conversation right now. So thank you, Swati and Diana, for sharing your fear. And as we're having Eva joining us right now, she can share with us her sense of fear. So we had, hi Eva, welcome. Just a brief introduction to you. We just discussed, or we just went inwards to check in what our fears are. And I know you just came quickly from some place. So I have a feeling that there is some fear you can share with us as in the present moment.
Yeah.
And welcome.
Thank you so much. And what were the fears you guys share, if I may know? What are your individual fears? I'm just saying, what were the fears Diana and Swati share? Were the fears of
Oh, okay. So hi. So I have tickets to India in April. I've not seen my family for 2.5 years. And now again with this virus being so unpredictable, there's this fear like when do I get to see them next?
Yeah.
Or this whole planning, when will they come? So stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
and for me, and for me, it was I shared the fear of not being needed, both by my kids and by the market, because I'm still on the verge of doing a new career, and there also comes a fear of success and failure. So that's what I was talking about.
Cool. Thank you so much, because that allowed me. And thank you so much for waiting. And but basically today we discovered that my uncle, I mean, yesterday he had like a cardiac arrest, not cardiac arrest, but a breathing issue. And then today we discovered that he has COVID. So pretty much like our plans, as what he say, like I'm supposed to be traveling at some point to London and this week. And so fear is everywhere right now. I think fear is a market. It's a market, and it has always been a market that has a positive content for information and decision making. The prevalence of these levels of fears, which are beyond, like perhaps like in the past, fears were more like sort of attached to a meaning of a story that we have created. But for us right now, the fear is just the fear of like what is next. So that's exactly the fear, is that you have to be prepared to be changing whatever you have been prepared to do in a very short period of time. And I think that's pretty much what for me fear is right now. Is this action point, or like what is it that you do when circumstances change so quickly. So yeah, that's for me the major fear is like, what is it, the story that I'm gonna attach to this, and how I'm gonna find a solution. And it can be like, sometimes it's a question of like, like today, like it was just like, if I stay here, I probably put myself at risk. I won't be able to travel, to do my commitments. There's not much I can do by being there. So yeah, basically, as I mentioned to Raditya in the past, like I've been living in fear for the last 6 months, because obviously I'm separated from my family when I'm in London. It's difficult, as what to say, when you are traveling. When can you meet someone? Can you go to work? Can you see people when you're at work? Like Diana is saying, like, is it like, do I put myself at risk by going to work? And if I become a risk, do I put others at risk? Because I am presenting myself to do what I have to do. So that's it. Like pretty much right now, fear is 100% of the decisions we make. And even when we sit and we don't move and we don't do anything, the story that get attached is also fear. So it's I guess like what I want to defer is like the fear of taking the right action, and the fear of not taking action, and then being inclusive by your fear, like or compacted by your fear, which are the two options, I guess.
Yes, and as what we were talking at the beginning, it's like the fear, how it exists, is the creation of how we create fear, which is exactly what you were saying about the stories that we're making up in our minds. And I think this is where this place of stillness really is of key to understand. Is this really something I am making up? Is this something I created? Even though, as you said, Diana, about, from experiences, from past experiences, and it relates to things in a different relationship, not necessarily in the fear that I was reading about, but I was reading about, the sense of running and always having the feeling of going somewhere fast, right? Instead of slowing down and going slow. And it is in our ancestry like this, because from when humans existed, walking wasn't existent. It was running that was existent, because we were running away from something, meaning we were in fear of something, so we had to save ourselves. And so what it relates to today is to understand that there might have been in our ancestry some type of fear existent that was relevant in that time, and that the time that we're in, the time that I am in, is different to the times that our ancestors were in, so that we can create a new story, a new acknowledgement of, here where I am right now, this fear that I'm having is now related to the experiences that I have created in my life, that I've experienced in my life. And at the same time, we're also creating new stories so that we don't attach ourselves to that fear. Because sometimes, even though fear can be uncomfortable, it also can create a lot of comfort. It can be feeling extremely comfortable being in fear, even though the thought of fear is not comfortable, but it is a sense of coming home. Because if we're always been that way, if it's, especially like, look at, you know, what you said, Eva, for the past 6 months, it's like we're still in that same, not necessarily place. It's interesting, like I was reading this quote the other day, not a quote, but by someone was pointing out how we've been the same, but we notice that we have changed.
Beautiful.
And so it's kind of like that way with fear, right? It's like the fear might still be there, but it's a different fear today than it was yesterday. Or just getting a slow, yeah, go ahead.
So I just wanted to just touch on that. I wanted to, yes, because like I said, for me, it was, before it was a lot of a fear of failure and also a fear of death. That was that motor that you are talking about, Raditya, you know, the running part. I was running, I was so used to that, and it felt like I should live like that. And then suddenly, when my father died, that fear kind of surfaced a little bit, you know, and then I felt more unease in my body, and I felt that I need to start doing things and running and, you know, taking care of these moments of life, because I don't know how long I have. And then I suddenly went back to my old behaviors a little bit. But luckily, I've been working so much with myself, so I actually could stop myself a little bit more and bring me back to the now and breathe and, you know, cold baths and meditation, and just realize that I actually don't have to run, because what I also am doing is, it's my nervous system then runs its own, and it's running the stress hormones, and it's not good for me, and I know that. So what's changed when I am not feeling this fear of death actually so much is that I feel this amazing feeling of peace and calm, and just, you know, I'm happy here. But also you talked about this fear of being comfortable. For me, it's more of a fear of the future now, fear of, you know, my future career, and this fear of success and failure, and they both like holding me back sometimes. And there I actually, maybe it is a bit comfort, because I'm not doing so much at all in the career wise. I'm kind of in a bubble and nothing happens, and I'm just like procrastinating instead. And it's a fear, both of them holding me back there. So it's one thing, and I think one step towards it, it's actually acknowledging what is it, and knowing what it is, and just feeling it, and then taking decisions on the actions in the future. So I just wanted to share that from what you said.
I love it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, if I may, like this, and I know that perhaps because we are in New Year's and in New Year's resolution, the idea I was saying, or that of being mindful about like the road ahead, in terms of like perhaps that idea of succeed, and no, of being really wanting to attract something to you that we haven't yet created, and how we reacted in that, you know, paradox of like, you know, like if I'm fear if I succeed, and I'm fear if I fail. But then I think the key beside like, you know, like befriending that fear, which means like regulating your body as a way, as a receptive of that fear, is also to have that sense of reflection of like how well I'm equipped to take the right decisions that are going to take me to the right place. Because I think what fear really does is that sense of phrasing, which is, I imagine, or what I Raditya say in terms of like, we can be fear and we are at home. And the major fear that humans we share is not to be accepted by other people. And there's so many issues around there that aren't biologically tested. And it's like, you know, even if you put a group of I mean experiments where you have a group of scientific people that have been tested with a group of actors, and the actors are providing the a false statement, but they're a group, and these people that are really prepared, eventually they just actually agree with the group to not be secluded outside. So I think that's kind of like one of the key elements that marker that when we act in fear, are we acting a fear of ourselves, or are we acting a fear of the group itself? Because, you know, that's when you separate it, and there's the different layers of the fear. You know, it's like, you know, do you act in base of not being part of someone that share that fear, that they are actually comfortable with that sense of like, as you say, it's home, you know, like being fearful of COVID is like, you know, like actually there's this whole thing of like, you know, like people that are pro or people that are against, and it's becoming this decision, which is going to turn very much about like how we communicate, you know, how we communicate these two different senses of fear, that vaccine, anti-vaccine, people with mask, people without mask, you know, like in a way it's a really potent vibration for communication, but it has an underline of like being fearful in both sides. I don't think that the people that don't want to have vaccinations are not fearful of the vaccines, and the people that won't stand for the people that have vaccinations or don't have vaccination, they're also fearful that they can be contacted. So it's like how underlying the conversation is like, how can we really live with our fears, how we can understand that our fears may be different to someone else, and that they have to actually be part of the same reality without creating bigger stories that create more distortion, and I guess that sense of being freezing and separated from one another.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, you know, what's arising for me is very interesting. We've talked about befriending the fear and dismissing the fear, but I'm thinking the antidote to fear, these words are coming to me, is like gratitude, love, hope, and the biggest one that's coming to me is playfulness. You know, as a child, when you think about it, what were your fears as a child? Probably you can think of monsters, dark rooms. They were very playful, you know. And I thought there's a lot of imagination linked to those fears. So there's a huge space around that fear. And as the responsibilities ramp up, as your attachments ramp up, the imagination goes down. And now the fear is real. You're living your fear versus you're playing with it. So I was wondering, can we look at a fear from a beginner's mind? Can we touch our inner child and look at our fear and then play with it rather than fear ruling us?
Yes, play should always be at the top of the list, because as we are creating the fear, we can create anything around it, and we can make it more, you know, attainable, because the fears that we're having, they are like, someone I was seeing this morning posted something around like don't let fear, or like don't have fear determine your future, or something like that, right? And it is actually exactly that. It's because we're looking into the future that causes us not to know what's going to happen. That not knowing, which actually is my theme for next week, is uncertainty within expectations, is to then create a fear around it, because we are afraid of what's to come, that we don't know is actually going to happen. So when you bring in that childlike thinking, it's like they don't see the future like that, right? I mean, that's the number one thing why they have it much easier to get into imagination and creating the world they're living in right now. They're not thinking about what's going to happen in an hour or 10 days or in a year from now. Even if they have this capability, they're still playing and being in the here and now. And this is why it's always so good to go into a beginner's mind. The other thing I also wanted to touch on, what Eva was saying about the fear being coming from the outside versus coming from the inside, is what we touched on a little bit on the beginning. Is like, actually outside of this conversation that was in our introduction to each other, is that depending on what information is being sent to us, and that's again just information, be it the news, be it the people you're with, as you know, we talked about the pro and against something, and so when we have people that agree or disagree with us, they creating information for us. And what we're doing with it is either creating fear or that belonging and connection by agreeing with something. And that is separating, as Eva was saying. I mean, I'm just repeating what Eva was saying pretty much, because all the words that come to me are the ones you mentioned already. But yeah, it's about the separating ourselves. And I think for me, when I was thinking about it earlier today, it really made me realize is that we have to be more aware of how information given to us affect us, and to pause before we let it take over us, to really notice, like, is this now creating a fear in me? Is this now, I mean, I just had it this morning, right? I had a friend calling me. She has to go to the doctor. Her son said he had a stomach ache and he couldn't go to school. Can you please watch him for an hour and a half? I mean, if it was 3 years ago, I probably wouldn't have thought a second about it. Well, I personally said yes initially. And then I had a conversation with my spouse, and he's also home. And he's like, well, we have Omicron going on. Do we know, what the status is? Do we know, all these things? And I have some, there are other people in my life, they relate to fear differently than I do. I don't think about all those things, right? And at the same time, I have to accept that the people that are dear to me, to really also see their point of views and understand, like, who is really important in my life. Yes, my life is just as important, but because I'm not thinking about certain aspects, maybe I can listen to someone else's without taking on that fear to me, and then feel guilty about the choices that I make. So being in this world that we are today, where we have, as Eva beautifully described, these, mask, no mask, vaccines, no vaccines, right? Like when we're having these things coming up, we always have to come home to ourselves. Not necessarily the fear, but just to ourselves. Like, what is my beliefs? And who do I want to include in this world that I'm in? And then we move from there, because we're never going to make it right for everyone. There's always going to be someone that will disagree with the choices that we make. But again, fear is just as much of a choice which way we're going. So I want to just send this out there. Yeah.
Yeah, but I actually wanted to touch a little bit other thing, because we always are talking now about that fear, but this fear we are talking about is more the mental one. But actually we need to realize that there's another fear that in the body, that fear, you know, that it comes from amygdala work. For example, if someone is coming, the car is coming towards you, and you are fearful and you react and you move away, that kind of fears exist also. And sometimes it's actually people who have trauma. It comes more from the body unconsciously, actually, in some cases. For example, like my daughter, I mentioned before, she had a fear of something painted on the bottom of the pool. And I mean, she's 11 now. She mentally knows that it's, you know, it's totally, I mean, not logical to be afraid of something painted on the bottom of the pool. But that fear, it's holding her in her body still. And every time she goes there, her body freezes. So there are still different kind of fears. I just wanted to point it out. And also, I just felt called to also that sometimes we have some fears we are not aware of, that are driving our behaviors. For example, with our closest one, people, as you said, Raditya, and for example, for the future, like with conscious parenting, that's very important. Like when we look at the kids and we say, oh, don't go there, and we stress and don't do that, and we get angry at our kids because they are doing something. But actually what driving us is fear for their maybe failure in the future. And that's why we are, you know, dictating to them, you have to do this and to do that. And actually these kind of fears affect our connection to the children and to the people. And it's good to be aware even of these kind of, you know, daily life fears. So I just wanted to, I know it's not the same thing you were talking about, Raditya, but I just felt called to mention that there are so many different kind of fears, and it's good to be aware of them as well.
Yeah, thank you, Diana. No, definitely. It's always mental and physical. Eva, yes, go ahead.
No, I think that we had to just link that to the way humans have evolved. I mean, and I'm just basically, fear has a plasticity. It has a plasticity in our individual subconscious as part of like our body response, and how sometimes an accumulation of stories. So as you say, like I actually have that same fear. Don't know why, but having a dolphin in the bottom of the pool when I was little, and it was related to watching sharks or whales or something, and just like basically my mom fear on the water. So there's kind of like how fear does layer, and it creates a story that we cannot negotiate with. And that's kind of like what I think is the plasticity of fear. So if you think about us as mammals, like if let's think about deer, just for the simplicity of how they behave. They are outside, they're roaming on the grass, you know, they don't live in fear, they're just alert. But then there's an attack, there's a moment of fear, there's a response, and then when that response disappears, they go back to be on bliss, and they, you know, until the fear signal come back, then they don't live in fear constantly, because it's just like, you know, they are focused at reproduction and eating, and, you know, whatever deers do. What happens when we get this brain as humans evolve is that we have this incredible machine that we still do not control. And then that the way we control it is by creating language, and then by creating storytelling, and then by also negotiating with the stories that we tell ourselves. So actually, the example of a child being scared, it could be, you know, it could be a part of like, as Diana said, like a shake on the body where you have been scared of something and you made that connection. It means that to be the conductor is water. But I always say, you know, like there's 2 points, is that we can tolerate high levels of fears, like people that have gone to wars, people that have lived in you know, the Second World War, and the conditions that they have a completely different tolerance to fear, and it was a lot more real. And the point is that yes, the amygdala is signaling there, but then you get to a point like other glands that when you get too much, it's just what is supposed to be fear, you just already is a burnout, and you no longer sense fear in the same way, which is the saying of like action. You may be fearful of jumping in the water, but by doing it and by, you know, like creating new attached stories, you can do it, and also by moving, but by moving your body and creating, tapping or, linking. I think that's an important thing. We need to make a space for the body, which means like, it could be through pranayama, it could be through body, but mostly through breathing and techniques. We can create a container for a space, and fill that space with a mantra that can be positive, like being self-confident, and then that's a way of attaching a new idea to that sense, to that physical sense. So I think what we are sort of delivering is the idea that in order to confront fear, all the tools, your body, your mind, your surroundings, society, have to come together. So having passed this Christmas, I always laugh about how we find incredible sight in the fat men that we didn't know come through ideally the chimney to bring us present. And, like it is, and that's like, if you think about it, it's quite sinister, because you are sleeping and then someone you don't know, it's not linking to, and then Santa come and live, and we tolerate that because we have created positive ideas around it, which are in a way that sense of recompense. And so that's kind of like perhaps like the next instance, like if you have fear and you want to mold that fear, then you're connecting to someone that have a different idea to you, or connecting to the fact that you can create different plasticity within your body and your mind. But it has to be a connection, and there has to be a creation of something different to the state of fear that is mostly that reactive, or even if the reaction is to be freeze.
Yes, thank you. I think Swati, yes, go ahead.
Hey, so, we're talking about fear, like almost like leaning into our fear. And what's coming to my mind is, I think everyone knows I've been through postpartum depression and psychosis. And, it takes me back to that episode when literally I had like thoughts of dropping my baby from the staircase. And, I'm just getting a little graphic here, but I had the fear of the stairs in my house, and I literally wanted to move houses. And because whenever I would see the stairs, it would remind me of that. And I think sometimes I feel like giving fear what it needs, like a logic, a proof that what you're saying is not going to happen, worked very well for me, logical brain. So I started taking my baby up and down the stairs, and I'm like, look, it didn't work. It didn't happen. And a lot of that was overridden by literally proving that, I know my consciousness, I know myself at my conscious level, this is never going to happen. And then, and of course, there's a lot of healing at the energetic level, where a lot of rituals and practices and just being in tune with who I am at my core, self-affirmations, things like that help me. And then, also what's interesting is the root of one fear is very well connected to other fears. It's a network of fears. And so when you discover one fear, you discover so many more other things that are going on, so many more other traumas that you've been through. So just wanted to bring that up.
That is beautiful, Swati. I feel like that kind of can bring us to a conclusion here as we're reaching the top of the hour. And I love the different ways you give us opportunities to recreate a relationship to the fear that we're having. And so that we can, as we have all mentioned, re-establish new stories, or at least new ways of thinking about a situation in this. So I would like to invite everyone to just bring back a little thought about today's session, what you felt was most, significant to repeat for all of us to see. And I definitely think that, the one thing about, like last week, I was talking about belief, right? And it was a little bit more about how we believe the things about ourselves, but you can also see belief to be another version of hope, to believe that our fears are not truthful, that they are not reality, that they are not happening right in this moment, that is possibly a relationship to what happened in the past and doesn't mean it will happen again in the future. And there has to be work done in between those two realities that we create. And so I definitely see as hope to be the antidote to fear. So yes, I invite you all to just share a little something. Go ahead, Diana.
Well, my conclusion is that there's different kinds of fears that we were talking about, and we will see the fears differently. It's one of the conclusions, and it's beautiful also, and also for me that what we were talking about, everything starts with awareness. When we are aware of our fears, then we can tackle them, like seeing at the core beliefs or traumas or whatever happened, and taking good, accountable, good steps to deal with it. You know, either if it's unconscious, maybe you need to do some healing or hypnotherapy, or you know, doing some things to calm down your nervous system, for example, as it was in my case, or is it very conscious, where you can actually use your logical mind and also take steps, as Swati was talking about, proving to your body that it's not fearful. And when you do that, you overcome that, you get stronger, and that's a beautiful thing. And as you say, Raditya, that our minds are not us, and we can choose what thoughts we want to believe or strengthen, and what thoughts we are ready to release. So thank you.
So I don't know if Swati want to go ahead, but if not, I'll just take my word. I think, yeah, fears is just not other things that are pointing. Like is as a market of information as it is happiness and joy. It's just, I thinking of the cautious, which I'm not sure if that's a concept, which is a level of layers that involve, and I'm picking up for what potentially that is space of psychosis, where you actually have something within yourself which is telling you that something is going to happen, and then you have another level, and that sense of who you are, and how that was a beautiful example, how like Swati just convinced herself that she had the power will to make a change, and it's just not, it's just about like if we think that like we are a point in the center and then 5 layers around us, it's like how you can embed those 5 layers, this and also to just tap it in terms of action. Fear is the best combat of fear is to take action and to be convinced, and convincing yourself that that action is not premeditated by the outcome, because the moment that you become more confident of doing something, then you realize that it's not. But also for me, we need to just really tap very carefully that we're going into kind of like an irrational fear. The fear of dying has always been there, but I imagine that when our ancestors were living in constant wars and, you know, like pillages and things like that, the awareness of fear will be much different. They have a different level of surrounding, and just today, because of everything that was happening, and I was coming to this call, I was thinking, what would have happened, you know, in medieval times, where everyone was just sort of dying, and we pretty much felt the same way. You know, my uncle wasn't well, and we just like, we have to leave you, you know. And I just was thinking, what would have happened in those times where really lots of people are moving away from that fear. And these are the stories we had to recreate to create an evolution, not only for ourselves, but for our communities, and especially for the people that come behind, because this is beyond words. This is a fear that is global, and that we need to use it as an opportunity to create a different plasticity around the concept, and to get confidence and focus into action that you know, that allow us to have a different reality. I really hope that this pandemic is gonna provide that opportunity.
I think I just want to conclude by what really worked well for me with fear was, especially during my postpartum period, was sharing it with someone. And I had therapists on board, and I still do. And, just confide in a friend, confide in a parent, wherever you can, in a community. And I think once you do that, you see how less power you give to it and how powerless it becomes, and you become powerful at your core and you know who you are. So that helped me. That was huge. If you keep it to yourself, I think it just grows and envelopes you, but when you share it, it becomes powerless.
Thank you, Swati. This is powerful. Thank you very much. And I was sharing with our group before this all started that I'm going to share 5 remembrance. And it's here to remind ourselves of what we are in this present moment, and to just move with this awareness through our days. And it's actually recommended to do before we go to bed, to remind ourselves of all the great things that we are. And it goes like this: I am of the nature to grow old. There is no way to escape growing old. I am of the nature to have ill health. There is no way to escape ill health. I am of the nature to die. There is no way to escape death. All that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature to change. There is no way to escaping being separate from them. My actions are my only true belongings. I cannot escape the consequences of my actions. They are the ground upon which I stand. And this is by Thich Nhat Hanh. And the main reason this is for us to remember is to exactly how Swati concluded for today. And to just remind ourselves that it's our actions, and actually everyone has said this here, it's our actions that carry the consequences of what will happen. And so the same thing goes for fear. We make it our control, and we make it the stories that we want to write for ourselves. So thank you everyone for being here today, for sharing your heart with me, with everybody else here who's watching. And I look forward to our next one. Thank you so much.
Thank you.